Dear students, we are going to see the various terms used in the preparation of union budget. It is important for you to understand these terms in order to have a depth of knowledge when the budget is being presented by the union finance minister in the parliament. So the budget will be consisting of two components. The first one is the expenditure component. Second one is the revenue component. And then if there is any difference between the expenditure and the revenue, the excess of expenditure over revenue is referred as deficit. First, we will discuss about the expenditure component. In expenditure, there are two types of expenditure. The first one is revenue expenditure. So all the expenses that are incurred for the government for its day-to-day operations are called revenue expenditure. It includes the salaries and wages to all the government employees, the interest paid to the loans borrowed by the government, the subsidies given by the government for various schemes, the aid and other support given by the central government to all the states and union territories, and the expenditure incurred on healthcare, education, scholarship, and various schemes for the day-to-day operations of the government are called revenue expenditure. These revenue expenditure are sourced by the revenue uh, created by the government through tax, non-tax revenues, and other revenues created by the government. The second type of expenditure is capital expenditure. This expenditure refers to all the expenditure incurred by the government for creating long-term assets like for building of roads, for starting public sector enterprises, expenditure on defense mobilizations, government buildings, purchase of land, and other creation of long-term assets. When the expenditure is made by the government, those expenditure are called capital expenditure. These capital expenditure are financed by loans, borrowings, and the proceeds of disinvestment made by the central government. Now we will move on to the deficit part. The word deficit refers to the excess of expenditure over revenue. When the government incurs uh, expenditure more than its revenue, it is called deficit. So there are three types of deficits in Indian budget. The first one is revenue deficit. The second one is fiscal deficit. The third one is primary deficit. So these are the three types of deficit our Indian budget is being. These words are being used in our Indian budget. Okay. So the first type of deficit is revenue deficit. When the government's revenue expenditure is in excess of its revenue receipt, it is called revenue deficit. So, if the government's total expenditure is in excess of total revenue, excluding the government's loans, revenue excluding the loans, it is called fiscal deficit. So, the total expenditure includes both uh, capital expenditure and revenue expenditure minus capital receipts not included, the loan is not included in the capital receipts, and the revenue receipts. So, if the capital expenditure and revenue expenditure is more than the capital receipts excluding borrowings and revenue receipts, that excess amount is called fiscal deficit. And we have primary deficit. The In the fiscal deficit component, if you deduct the interest payment from the revenue expenditure, it is called primary deficit. So these are the various terms which you should be familiar before watching or analyzing the union government's budget. If you know the meaning of these words, it will be a little bit easier for you to understand the budget presented by the central government's finance minister. Thank you.